There are several Buddhist stories. The first is about that young boy who from the earliest age had aspirations to become a Buddhist monk, to join the hallowed numbers in the monastery nearby. But it was also obvious that he was going to grow into a giant of a man. And indeed he did. Within the walls of the monastery, he grew to great strength and stature. But he was a gentle giant. He'd learned the tenets of Buddhism: compassion, non-himsa, non-hurting. But then his country was at war, and emissaries were sent out to conscript young and strong men into the emperor's army. And the monasteries were not excluded from this. So when the emissary came to his monastery, this great man of stature was immediately taken in to be a conscript in the emperor's army. He went to the abbot begging, "What am I to do?" The abbot said, "Your duty is your duty. Now go and be a soldier." And indeed he did. He became renowned for his valor, his strength, his fearlessness. And then the war came to an end, victorious, and he went back to the monastery. But when he presented himself to the abbot with tears rolling down his face, he said, "I am no longer worthy to be admitted into these hallowed grounds." And the abbot scolded him roundly. "Your duty was your duty, and now it is your duty to meditate. Now go and take off that armor and come to the meditation hall." The second story is also about a young boy with aspirations to join the hallowed ranks of the monks. And he made his way through the gate of a monastery with a stone stairway which led way up where the monastery was located on a high hill. He spent his years there also learning the precepts, particularly that of compassion and non-hurting. But there were many visitors who came to that monastery bringing news of the world outside, and they told of evil doings and greed and injustice. And this settled into the minds of our now young man. And finally he came to that point where he went to his abbot and he said, "I must go. I cannot bear to think of the weight of the evil that is abounding in the world. I must go and do something about it, address this evil." Now the old abbot said nothing, not a word, but he did take down from the wall of the monastery a sword which was a symbol of slicing the illusions of life, but still sharp and acute, being made of the finest steel. And the abbot handed it to the young man, along with a small mirror, which was said to be the mirror of true seeing. Now the young man accepted these from the abbot, and looking into the mirror, he saw reflected back at him the shining visage of the acolyte, with a face of resolve and determination. And then, putting it away in his robe, he made his way down the stone stairs of the monastery and out the monastery gate. He spent many years in the world fighting evil, until, exhausted at this seemingly futile task, he turned his feet around to take the road that led back to his monastery. When he came to the gate, in an attempt to open the gate, he found that he could not unlatch it. Bringing his greatest efforts, he could not make an opening through this gate. In great frustration, he took his sword and tried to slice the gate open, but to no avail. Exhausted and sweating, he stood there feeling helpless. But just then, coming down the stone stairs was one of his old compatriots, one of his old companions, carrying a flask to gather water from the lake nearby. And so the monk came down, and effortlessly the gate opened in front of him. Now, to the great surprise of our traveller, they made greetings with one another. But then, of course, our traveller was sweating and exhausted and thirsty. So they walked together to the nearby lake, and the monk dipped his pitcher into the water. But our traveller, although the mirror of true seeing had long since been left in some place, the whole lake seemed to become the mirror of true seeing. And when our traveller looked into its clear water, to his great horror, he saw a demon, the face of a demon with dripping fangs. He fainted away in shock and horror. It was only his companion who came with water from his pitcher and sprinkled it on his face to revive him. One can only imagine what thoughts were in our traveling monk's mind. But his old companion raised him to his feet and said, "Come, my friend, the abbot is waiting for you." What is the similarity or the difference for you between these two stories, what do they evoke in us from the depths of our own experience and knowing? What is the meaning of these two stories for you? What is their similarity and or their difference?
Similarities, both went out to fight, but the difference is that one was conscripted and the other one did it because he wanted to. And that had different outcomes. Because one could come back to the monastery, but the other one was trapped.
It is a true story to be told from my own experience. Some long while ago, there was a visiting Frenchman. I'm not quite sure whether it was one of your friends. But he was a policeman in Paris, and he came several times to the meditations as a visitor and didn't say very much at all. But then one day he came up to me after the meditation and he said, "I'm afraid I have to go back to Paris tomorrow. I've been a policeman for 32 years, and I'm afraid that when I go back, I may have to kill someone." This was at the time when all of the Paris riots were going on. There were a lot of killing and hurting going on. And I scolded him. I said, "What do you mean? Because I kill people every day." What does that mean for us? In the deeper, bigger picture.
Well, he had to do his duty. That was his dharma. He had to go and do that. And that was all in line with what he was doing. And then once he's finished his duty, then he just needs to sort of figure things out like the other two did.
Yes. And how does that relate to ourselves and our ability to stand up fearlessly in the truth of the moment? Maybe food for ponder until there's another story, because you recognize that there is a thread here, like that chain that has no beginning and no end, that relationship between the links. This is why stories are told.
I guess when duty calls,